All right, so chapter 4 is we're doing lesson 3 and lesson 4, and it's add and subtract like and unlike fractions. So for example 1, it says, problem 1, it says, explain how to find 3/10 plus 2/10 and then find the sum. So how do I do it? So you are going to, since the denominator is the same, you just add the numerators. You put it over the same denominator, and then you simplify if you can. So here is how you show your work. Okay, so you're going to add the numerators, put it over the same denominator. You get 5/10, and then you simplify by dividing by 5, and you get 1/2. So here it says the table shows the fractions of 1 hour for certain minutes. Okay, so we have 5 through 30, and the fraction of 1 hour for 5 minutes is 5 to 60. 10 is 10 to 60, 15 is 15 to 60, and so forth. Okay, so what we can do here is now, once we have that, we can simplify each one of those fractions. So 5/60 simplifies to 1/12. 10/60 simplifies to 1/6. 15/60 1/4. 2/60 simplifies to 1/3. And 30/60 simplifies to 1/2. So here we want to know what fraction of 1 hour is equal to the sum of 15 minutes and 20 minutes. So if I look at the simplified fractions, if I look at the simplified fractions, for 15 and 20, we would add 1/4 plus 1/3, right? If I'm going to use these fractions, because now those fractions have common denominators, then we can add them together. So 15 minutes is 15 out of 60, and 20 minutes is 20 out of 60. And then when we simplify, when we add this together, we get out of 60, right? So here, is that simplified? No. So we can go ahead and simplify by dividing by 5. Very good. So we divide by 5 in the numerator and the denominator, and we will end up with 7/12. Here, on the left-hand side, are the rules for adding and subtracting like fractions. And a like fraction are fractions that have the same denominator. On the right-hand side over here, these are the rules for adding or subtracting unlike fractions. And unlike fractions are fractions with different denominators. So to add and subtract like fractions, those are the ones that already have common denominators, you're going to add or subtract the numerators and then put that result over the same denominator. So 5/10 plus 2/10, you're going to add 5 plus 2, and then you're going to put it over 10. And the same thing with the subtraction. Okay? So for when we are adding and subtracting unlike fractions, here, remember, you cannot add or subtract fractions unless you have common denominators. Okay? So the first thing you have to do is you have to rename the fraction using the least common denominator. In other words, you need to get the common denominator, right? And it's best if you get the least common denominator. Then you just follow the rules for adding like fractions. So once you have common denominators, you follow these rules. You add or subtract like normal, and then you will simplify at the end, if possible, or if necessary. So, for example 1 and 2, this is showing the like fractions, adding with like fractions. Here we have 5/9 plus 2/9. All we're doing is we are adding the numerators. 5/9 plus 2/9. You add the 5 plus 2 and you put it over 9. And if you need to, you can simplify at the end. for example 2. This is, does everybody see the negative in front? That is -3, and this one over here is -1. So this is -3/5 plus -1/5. The numerators are -3 and -1. Is everybody clear with that? So that's what you're going to add. -3 plus -1, same sign, you add like normal, and it stays negative. So we're going to end up with -4/5. All right, for the example for the unlike fractions, here we have 1/2 plus 1/4. Now, on a number line, this is what it looks like. We have fourths on here. And the reason we have fourths on here is because we can rewrite 1/2 with a denominator of 4 using 2 of them, right? So 2/4 is equal to 1/2. Does that make sense? So this 1/2 or 2/4 is, we're going to add that to the other 1/4. So this is 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So 1/2 plus 1/4 is 3/4. That's what it looks like on a number line. I'm not going to expect you to add on a number line. So let's take a look at method 2. So for method 2, what you need to do is you get common denominators. So we have 1/2 plus 1/4. The common denominator between 2 and 4 is what? 4. Very good. So that means we need to change the 1/2. We need to change the 1/2. So in order for us to change that the 2 in the denominator to a 4, we'll multiply times 2 in the denominator. And if I do that in the bottom, I have to do it in the top. So we're going to end up with 2/4. Let me back up here. We're going to end up with 2/4 plus 1/4, and that gives us 3/4, which is exactly what we got when we were doing it on the number line. Again, here, for example A, we have 1/3 plus 2/3. Those already have common denominators. So 1/3 plus 2/3, we're going to add the numerators. So that's 1 plus 2. And we're going to put it over the same denominator. So this is going to give us 3/3, which is equal to 1. Very good. So for letter B, here we have different signs, right? The rule for adding numbers or rational numbers with different signs is same as the integers, okay? You subtract the digits and take the sign of the higher number, right? But the digits that we're looking at is going to be this -3 and this +1. Is everybody clear with that? So when we rewrite this, I'll just show you here, we've got -3 plus 1, and that goes over the same denominator. So -3 plus 1 is just adding integers, right? That's going to be -2 over 7. All right, so here we have -4 plus +4. What do you know about that? Those are opposites. Those are additive inverses, right? And when you add a number plus its additive inverse, what do you get? 0. Now, if you do not remember that rule or that property, then the way that you would show your work is this way. So we have -1 plus 1 over 4, right? So -1 plus 1, that's 0 over 4, which of course, if you have a fraction with 0 in the numerator, it is always 0. Now take a look at these unlike fractions. Okay, so here we have 1/6 plus 2/3. 1/6 plus 2/3. What's the common denominator with 6 and 3? 6. So the only one I have to change is the second fraction, right? So we're going to multiply this 3 times 2, and if I multiply the denominator by 3, I have to multiply the numerator by 2. Okay? So when we rewrite, we have 1/6 plus 4/6. And when we simplify, we end up with 5/6. So once you get common denominators, then you're going to follow the rules for adding like fractions. All right, here we have 9/10 plus -1/2. The common denominator with 10 and 2 is what? 10. So once again, we're going to change the second fraction. So we're going to multiply here times 5, and we'll multiply here times 5. So when we rewrite, we've got 9/10 plus a negative, don't forget your parentheses, a negative 5/10. Is everybody with me? So now the numbers that we're adding is a positive 9 plus a negative 5. So 9 plus negative 5 is what? 4. And that goes over 10. Now this can be simplified by dividing by 2. So you're going to show that work. And we're going to end up with 2/5. Sophia ate 3/5 of a cheese pizza. Jack ate 1/5 of a cheese pizza and 2/5 of a pepperoni pizza. How much pizza did Sophia and Jack eat together? Now, I know there's a lot of things going on here, but pay attention. So we're going to add what Sophia ate to what Jack ate. So that's 3/5 plus 1/5 plus 2/5. Now, what's going on here? If you look at this, if we're looking at this first parentheses and comparing it to this next parentheses, do you see what they did here? They just flipped them, right? So they were using the commutative property of addition to flip them around. Does everybody see that? So now look at what's happening from this parentheses to this parentheses. What are they doing? They're moving it from the back 2 to the front 2. You see that? What property is that? That is the associative property of addition. That tells us we can add in any order we want. Okay? So the reason that they did that is because look at what happens. 3/5 plus 2/5 is equal to 5/5, which is equal to 1 whole. Does everybody see that? So 1 whole plus the 1/5, that gives us 1 1/5. You got it? The same thing is happening here with the unlike fractions, but we just found, actually we didn't even have to find common denominators yet. So here, when I look at the first numbers here, the first parentheses, so from here, from these two parentheses to this one, okay, they're just flipping it. That's the commutative property of addition. Ever see that? Now, going from this parentheses to these parentheses. You see that? They went from the first 2 to the second 2. That's the associative property of addition. So, when I add, this is a negative. See, that's a negative 3/4. Negative 3/4 plus a positive 7/4 gives me a positive 4/4. Right? 4/4 is equal to 1. You see that? So we end up with 1 plus the 5/9, which is equal to 1 5/9. So for example E, it says Eduardo used fabric to make 3 costumes. He used 1/4 of a yard for the first, 2/4 a yard for the second, and 3/4 a yard for the third. Okay? How much fabric did Eduardo use altogether? So we are adding 1/4 plus the 2/4 plus the 3/4. Now, I'm going to show this work just like they did in the example. So the first thing I'm going to show you is that we can flip these two around. Okay? Why do I want to get this 3/4 closer to that 1/4 so we can put them together. Okay? So when I do that, when I flip that around, I'm going to get 1/4 plus 3/4 plus 2/4. Does everybody see this? So now, what I did was I just flipped them, right? So that's going to be the commutative property. So now, can I just add these two together? Okay. All right, so I made a mistake. So here, what I'm going to do is rather than moving the parentheses, see this part right here? I'm just going to flip those around using my commutative property. Okay? So that's using the commutative property to flip them around. So I was right the first time, right? So here, what we're doing is we're just flipping these two around. See this 2/4? Switch to the other side, right? See the 2/4 and 3/4, they just flip. That's the commutative property. So now, I'm going to take these two parentheses and I'm going to move from the back two to the front two. So now I'm going to use my associative property to move the parentheses from the second two to the first two. Now look at what happens here. We end up with 1/4 plus 3/4, which is 4/4, plus 2/4. So 4/4 is equal to 1 whole plus 2/4, which simplifies to 1 1/2 yards. So for the next examples, here we're doing leave it, change it with subtraction. So here we're going to leave it, change it. Now don't forget that when you do leave it, change it, I want you to use a colored writing utensil. Is that clear? All right. So when we rewrite -1/5/8 plus -3/8. And then you just follow the rules for adding like fractions. Is that clear? All right. So here we have example F. We're going to do leave it, change it. So leave it, change it. So when I rewrite, this is going to be equal to 5/9 plus a -2/9. Is everybody clear with that? So 5 plus -2 is 3. Very good. And then we just put that over the same denominator, and now we can simplify to 1/3. You got that? Now, over here on the other side, before we do that leave it, change it, we have to get common denominators. So what's the common denominator with 4 and 3? 12. So we're going to multiply times 4 here and here. We'll multiply times 3 here and here. So now we can rewrite. So we end up with 9/12 minus 4/12. And now we can do our leave it, change it. So we're going to leave the first fraction, change the subtraction to addition, and change the second fraction to the opposite. So that's -4/12. And now we just follow the addition rules for like fractions. So 9 plus a -4 is 5. And we put that over the same denominator, 12. Okay, because I fumbled so much with Eduardo's example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do example F just like I would with the commutative and associative property that I did with Eduardo. I'm going to do that with example F. So the first thing I'm going to do here, I've got the quantity negative 3 tenths plus 5 eighths plus 23 tenths. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip these two using the commutative property. So we will end up with 5 eighths plus a negative 3 tenths. And then I close this parentheses here, and then plus the 23 tenths. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is take these parentheses, this set of parentheses, and I'm going to move them from the first two to the second two. Okay, so I'm going to move them from the first two to the second two. So now, when I simplify, I'm going to end up with 5 eighths plus, and here, negative 3 plus positive 23 gives me 20 tenths. Okay? So the first thing I did was I flipped these two with the commutative property. Then I moved the parentheses from the first two to the second two using the associative property of addition. So now I end up with 5 eighths plus 20 tenths. Now when I simplify this more, I end up with 5 eighths plus 20 tenths is equal to 2. So when I add those together, I get 2 and 5 eighths. Much better. All right, let's do these two examples down here. So this, again, is subtracting fractions. So here, we're going to use our leave it, change it, change it. So for the first one, we're going to leave the first fraction. We're going to change the subtraction to addition, and we're going to change the negative 5/12 to a positive 5/12. So now, if you rewrite, you'll have negative 11/12 plus positive 5/12. Okay? So now you have you just follow your rules for adding rational numbers with like denominators. So we are going to add the numerators. So we've got negative 11 plus 5 gives us a negative 6 over 12. And of course 6/12 you can simplify by dividing by 6 in the numerator and the denominator. And that gives you a negative 1/2. Okay?